Dreamcast games that are not on Dreamcast. That's what we're talking about today in this episode of Dreaming Out Loud. So I've picked out a bunch of games from my collection, original Xbox as well as PlayStation 2, and these are games that would have been on Dreamcast at some point had it been around a bit longer. Some of them more speculation than anything, and others are actual games that were headed to Dreamcast but cancelled for whatever reason, most likely the discontinuation of the console. So we're going to take a look at these games and I'll tell you what I think of them. So we'll start off with the PlayStation 2 games. The first one is Aqua Aqua. This is a sequel to Wetrix Plus, which was on the Dreamcast, as well as Wetrix, which was the original Wetrix, which was on the N64, but we're talking about the Dreamcast here, so it's essentially the sequel to Wetrix Plus. They changed the name of the series to Aqua Aqua for whatever reason, and they also added these little characters here. I forget what their purpose in the game is, if anything. Maybe they're just mascots, I don't really know. But I don't remember liking this game quite as much as the original Wetrix Plus on the Dreamcast, which happens to be one of my favorite games on the Dreamcast, and probably my favorite puzzle game on the Dreamcast, if not my favorite puzzle game of all time. It's that good. But it's a bit hard to explain what this game is about. Essentially, you create a bunch of ponds by manipulating the land, and you fill the ponds with water, which is typically what a pond is, and then you evaporate the water out of the ponds to get points. So I guess you could say, in a way, you get points by creating steam. But there's a lot to this game. You want to create a bunch of small little ponds, and all those little ponds act like multipliers for your score, and you make one big pond or lake that you can use to evaporate the water, and you keep the little ponds filled with water as multipliers. There's just so much to this game. It's so much fun. I know I'm kind of really talking about Wetrix Plus, but this game is essentially the same thing. They added a few little elements to it. I don't think I like this game quite as much as the original for whatever reason. I haven't played a whole lot of this, to be honest. I played about a few hours of it, but I think I like the original Wetrix Plus a little bit better. I forget the exact reason why, but I think I did a video on this at some point, so maybe you could take a look at that and see what I thought of it. But yeah, Aqua Aqua, sequel to Wetrix Plus. This next game might be a bit of a surprise to some of you who have not watched my Games That Never Were series, in which I covered this game in one of the episodes, but the game is Red Faction. Now, you've probably heard of this game because it's a pretty famous series, been around a long time, starting with this original game. I have not actually played this particular one. I've had this in my collection for a while now. I just haven't gotten around to playing it. But I have played Red Faction Guerrilla, which is a newer game in the series. I believe the third installment, if I'm not mistaken. But the thing with this series that makes it stand out from other first-person shooters, it is a first-person shooter, is the fact that it has so much destructional capability. Is that a term I can use? It has geomod technology, which you can see on the back of the case there. But essentially what this allows you to do is destroy things piece by piece. So you can go up to a building with a sledgehammer and hit it and watch it crumble apart. You can attach explosives to the building and watch it just pieces go flying everywhere. It's awesome. I imagine it's not quite as spectacular in the original game, at least compared to games these days, but in Red Faction Guerrilla it's really impressive, and I imagine back in the day when this came out this was really impressive as well. But yeah, this would have ended up on the Dreamcast at some point. It was unfortunately cancelled. I believe when it was headed to the Dreamcast, it was under the codename Project Revolution, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that's what it was called. Kind of going by the back of the case where it says Join the Revolution. But yeah, this was headed to the Dreamcast at one point. Unfortunately, never ended up on the console. Next up we have Arctic Thunder. This is the last game in Midway's Thunder series of games, two of which were on the Dreamcast in the form of Hydro Thunder and Four Wheel Thunder. So naturally this would have ended up on the Dreamcast at some point had it been around a bit longer. It is basically Hydro Thunder with snow. And also they added weapons, so there's missiles and things like that as well, and a lot of environmental hazards to avoid, things like that. To be honest, I don't think this is the greatest game in the series. It's probably the worst. That's not saying it's a bad game, it's just not as good as Hydro Thunder and Four Wheel Thunder. I just don't think the game plays quite as smoothly. For some reason, it seems kind of stuttery and jittery and not very smooth. Don't know why. This was also on the Xbox. I don't know if it was smoother on the Xbox version. But as far as the PS2 version is concerned, not entirely impressed with it. It's not a bad game, though. If you're a fan of the Thunder series, it's definitely worth checking out. Here's the back of the case here. It says the ultimate battle on snow. But yeah, Arctic Thunder. To finish off the pile of PlayStation 2 games, we have Sega Superstars. Sega Superstars is a collection of mini-games that used the PlayStation 2's iToy camera. Now, you might say, well, how could this work on the Dreamcast because it didn't have the PlayStation 2 iToy? Well, while that's true, it did have its own camera. Right behind me there, that is the Dream Eye camera, which could have been used potentially for something like this, even though it never really was used for games. It used the Visual Park software for video chat and sending greeting cards, taking pictures, and things like that. It was used also in Jet Grind Radio. You could import graffiti from pictures that you've taken with the camera, but it was never really used in any games. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't have been used in games. It definitely could have been used for something like this, which is a really fun collection of mini games themed on Sega's various franchises like Sonic the Hedgehog and Crazy Taxi, Samba de Amigo, and Puyo Puyo, and Sonic the Hedgehog, House of the Dead, Virtua Fighter, Virtua Striker. So many different franchises were crammed into this game. But some of the mini games are better than others. My personal favorite one on here is Virtua Striker. And it's actually a really, really simple concept where you use your head to hit soccer balls into balloons and pop them. And all the balloons are different point values, and you try and get as many points as you can within the time limit. And it's strangely addicting. I remember getting this game for Christmas one year and being completely addicted to that game. I just couldn't stop playing it. It was so much fun. But yeah, the Virtua Striker game alone is worth buying this for. Honestly, it's so much fun. But there are other games as well, House of the Dead, where you essentially smack zombies instead of shooting them. There's also a Crazy Taxi game, which I completely forget what that's about. There's a Puyo Puyo game where you use your arm to guide the Puyos into bowls that are the correct color. There's a Choo Choo Rocket game, which I think is essentially just Choo Choo Rocket, except you're controlling things with your hands. I forget exactly, though. But yeah, it's a really fun game. If you have a PlayStation 2 and an iToy, I recommend grabbing this. But yeah, this could have been on the Dreamcast at some point. Of course, that is pure speculation. But it definitely could have worked, especially with the Dream Eye camera there. So moving on to the original Xbox, we have Sega GT 2002. Well, it's not hard to imagine that this would have been on the Dreamcast at some point for obvious reasons. But we also have Jet Set Radio Future, which again, definitely would have been on the Dreamcast had it been around until, 2002, I guess. But yeah, I have actually not played either one of these games. I recently picked this up for cheap at, I think it was some sort of swap sale. I don't know. I don't remember. But yeah, it was cheap, and I picked it up, and I've been wanting this game for a long time now. And I'm a huge fan of Jet Grind Radio, or Jet Set Radio, one of my favorite games on the Dreamcast, so definitely looking forward to trying this out at some point. Next up, we have a game that's exclusive to the original Xbox, and that is Gallion, or Gallion. I think it's technically pronounced Gallion. I don't know if the game is pronounced that way. I would assume probably. For some reason, I've always said Gallion. But this is an adventure game with a really cool story, has some great voice acting. Actually kind of reminds me of Monkey Island in a way. But yeah, it's kind of an open world game, and there is sword fighting involved, and yeah, it's just a really good game. It's actually published by Atlas as well, which is owned by Sega these days, so go figure. But yeah, it's apparently it is by the creator of the Tomb Raider games, so you can kind of go off of that a bit. That is sort of Tomb Raider-ish, I guess, but not entirely. I don't know, but you play as a sailor guy or pirate. I forget if he's a sailor or pirate, but not really much of a difference. I guess they're both sailors. But according to the back of the case, it is a tale of adventure, action, mystery, romance, and revenge. So a bit of revenge in there, just like Shenmue. So I guess you could say this is Shenmue with sailors. Next up, we have a sequel to a game that was on the Dreamcast, and that is Soldier of Fortune 2 Double Helix. This is the sequel to one of my favorite games on the Dreamcast. I absolutely love Soldier of Fortune. Just going around blasting enemy limbs off with a shotgun is just so much joy. But unfortunately, this game is not quite as good, in my opinion anyway. I find the environments kind of bland. There's a lot of like jungle environments, but it's a lot of samey environments, not very inspired. The original Soldier of Fortune had so many different environments. It had desert, it had indoor hotels, and and outdoors and buildings, and I don't know. There were a lot of different environments to explore that were all varied and different. Whereas this one, a lot of jungle. I just don't like it quite as much. But also, the other thing is, what happened to the dismemberment? That's the one question I have about this game. For some reason, I don't even know if you can dismember enemies in this game. I can't imagine they removed it from the game, because that is basically what the original was known for, being able to blast off enemy limbs. This one, I have such a hard time trying to do that. I intentionally try and shoot a guy's leg off with a shotgun, and it just doesn't work. I don't know if they changed something with the engine to make it more difficult or what, but yeah, it's not as fun. But I don't know. It had online multiplayer, which is cool, I guess. But yeah, this probably would have ended up on the Dreamcast had it been around a bit longer. Next up, we have Outrun 2, which is definitely a game that would have ended up on Dreamcast at some point, since it is a first-party Sega franchise, and quite a famous one at that. I believe this is the second game in the Outrun series on next-generation consoles, because there was Outrun 2006, and then I think this came afterwards, but I could be wrong, it might be the other way around. But regardless, you know, to be honest, I'm not really a big fan of this game. I know a lot of people love it, but personally, I don't know, I played quite a bit of it, and I just couldn't get into it. I just don't think it's all that fun. But that's just me, not my cup of tea, but I had to include it in this list regardless, because it definitely would have been on Dreamcast. Next up, we have Project Gotham Racing. This is the sequel to Metropolis Street Racer on the Dreamcast, which is a really good racing game on the Dreamcast. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but what I like about it is it's a very casual and chill, relax racing game, if that's a thing. What I really like about it is the music and I don't know, it's just something about it. It's just very relaxing to play, and I enjoy playing it when I don't want to think too much. There is even a free roam mode in the game as well you can unlock, and you can just drive around casually, which is nice. And I love the radio stations and the music in the game, very, very chillaxed. But then we have Project Gotham Racing, which is the sequel to the game. They changed the series name after that, and it went on to spawn many, many sequels, this being the first one. But I actually have not played this yet. I have had it for a while now, I just haven't gotten around to playing it. But yeah, Project Gotham Racing definitely would have been on Dreamcast at some point. And to finish things off, we have the Silent Scope Complete Collection, which is a collection of Silent Scope 1, 2, and 3, the original of which was on the Dreamcast, and is actually, I'd say, another one of my favorite Dreamcast games. It's a sniper game where you snipe enemies. And what's cool about the original Silent Scope on Dreamcast is it actually supports the Dreamcast mouse, which is interesting because it says nothing about it on the case or in the manual. So it's kind of a hidden feature, I guess you could say, which kind of makes it a little bit of a better version of the game compared to this one, because this doesn't support a mouse. So as far as control is concerned, it controls better on Dreamcast because it has a mouse. But I actually have not played this yet. This is another game I picked up a while ago, and it's just kind of sat on the shelf. I will get around to it eventually because I am a big fan of Silent Scope. I love the game, it's so much fun. You have a very strict time limit in the game, so you have to snipe enemies really fast. But it's so much fun to try and get a high score on the game, get all those headshots, and it's something about it is really, really satisfying, and I just love the game. But I'm definitely looking forward to trying the sequels at some point, even though I don't have mouse control on these ones. But yeah, this would have been on Dreamcast. And there you have it, a whole ton of Dreamcast games that were not on Dreamcast. unfortunately. But it's still great that we were able to actually play these games, regardless of the fact that they were not on the greatest console to ever live. But yeah, some really good games in here, and it's just amazing to think how many great games were headed to the console. It's a shame, really. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this first episode of Dreaming Out Loud. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.